Tonight's presentation, Borescope Initiative. Our presenter, Mike Bush. Mike is president of Savvy Aviation Incorporated. He's author for numerous aviation publications, a presenter for weekly webinars now going back over a decade. Mike's a CFI, an A&P with IA privilege, 2008 FAA's Aviation Maintenance Technician of the Year, and a member of EAA. Mike, thank you so much for being with us tonight. I'm turning control of the presentation over to you.
Okay, I got my fingers crossed that this is going to work.
Well, I can hear you good and I can see your screen, so far so good.
I'm not seeing my, oh, there it goes. Okay, well, that's good. Well, is that a misprint, or am I reading the number of people in the room correctly? This looks like a terrific turnout tonight.
Oh, we got a great turnout. Yeah, yeah, 1,287 and counting.
Yeah, I hope half of you guys are A&Ps. I think tonight's ought to be good for one AMT credit and a half wings credit because I'm hoping to be able to reach lots of mechanics tonight about the Borescope Initiative. And if I sound a little funny, it's because I'm doing this webinar under slight battlefield conditions from a beautiful suite at the Embassy Suites in Katy, Texas, where I spent a very long day today at the Shell Technology Center in Houston. This is a sort of an amazing place. I've never been here before. It is 1.2 million square feet of mostly laboratories. And I can't even relate to what 1.2 million square feet is. I'm sure that even after all the walking I did today, there's at least 900,000 square feet left unexplored. But the Shell invited me to their first ever, and hopefully not last ever, Aero Shell summit meeting, where a whole bunch of people in the primarily in the piston GA space all came together. Some of whom I knew, some of whom I met for the first time, and we had a very, very interesting day here at Shell. And I'm sure a webinar is going to come out of this. But at any rate, tonight I'm not going to be talking about Shell. They'll say that for another time. I'm going to be talking about borescopes. Now, you guys may be sick and tired of hearing me talk about borescopes because I've talked about it a lot in previous webinars. Here are some of them, including the one I did last month called Ending the War on Jugs, where we talked about the fact that problems in cylinders don't always mean the cylinder needs to come off, and the borescope is what helps us assess whether a cylinder can be cured of its illness without removing it. So I've talked a lot about this stuff, and I've talked about the fact that the borescope is a vastly better method for assessing cylinder condition than the old-fashioned compression test, and the fact that borescopes have become just enormously better over the last few years, and also their price has dropped precipitously. So you can now get borescopes that provide absolutely awesome image quality and the ability to take images that we were never able to get before at a very reasonable price. The borescope here is a Vividia VA400, which at the time I made this slide a couple of weeks ago was on sale for $299.95, and somebody told me yesterday that they got one for like $225 from Oasis Scientific, who manufactures it. So they're kind of amazing bargains for what they do. And the compression test may tell you that a cylinder is sick, but the borescope tells you exactly what's making it sick, how bad it is, and whether you've caught the problem early enough to remediate it without pulling the cylinder off using non-invasive techniques that I talked about last month, lapping valves in place if it's a problem with an exhaust valve, or doing a solvent ring flush if it's a problem with the rings and air getting past the rings. And by doing this, not only are we saving a lot of downtime, a lot of money, but we're also avoiding the risks involved in cylinder removal and reinstallation. And I think last month I put up quite a photo gallery of airplanes that went down shortly after maintenance, usually very shortly after maintenance, that involved cylinder removal, because it's just so easy to mess that process up when it's done in the field. But there's a problem which I want to discuss tonight, and that the problem is that although borescopes are absolutely wonderful things, very few A&P mechanics ever have been taught how to do a proper borescope inspection of cylinders. You know, there's basically no training on this subject in any A&P curriculum, any A&P school curriculum that I'm aware of. Probably the reason that there isn't is because there are no questions about borescopy on the A&P knowledge tests that the FAA provides, and a lot of A&P training, unfortunately, is sort of teaching to the test. So it's not surprising that this isn't a subject that is taught very often. And what's worse is there's nothing in the literature to show a mechanic how to do a proper borescope inspection. There's nothing in any of the service manuals. There's nothing in any of the service bulletins from engine manufacturers that talk about how to do a proper borescope inspection. Now, curiously, Continental started as early as 2003, saying that they require a borescope inspection every time you do a compression test, which means at least at every annual or 100-hour inspection. But Continental offers not one syllable of guidance as to how to do the borescope inspection that they require. They tell you all sorts of stuff about how to do a proper compression check and how to manipulate the prop and what to do if you don't like the numbers that come up, but they don't say anything about how to do a borescope inspection, even though their guidance on this, which used to be Service Bullet SBO 3-3 and is now incorporated in the Standard Practices Manual M0, requires in context of a borescope inspection at least 9 times, and yet they don't say anything about how to do it. Lycoming is even worse, because Lycoming doesn't say anything about borescope inspections of cylinders. They're completely silent on the subject. And because I've been such a nut on borescopes for many, many years, all of the people who work in my company, Savvy Aviation, get to look at lots and lots and lots of borescope images. I mean, I'm sure we've looked at tens of thousands of borescope images over the years. And so, we are pretty good at looking at these things, and we kind of know what to look for. And but not a lot of mechanics have had that experience. And most of the borescope images that we see, some of them are taken by maintenance involved aircraft owners, but most of the images we see are taken by A&P mechanics all over the country, because we work with hundreds and hundreds of shops all over the country. By the way, if your shop is marked red on this map, that's not a good sign, but I won't get into that. And a lot of the images we receive, especially ones that were captured by A&P mechanics, turn out to be diagnostically useless, because the person who shot them really didn't understand what it was we were looking for when we look at a borescope. We see lots of extreme close-ups that don't give us any context. We very seldom see images taken with the valves open, which are some of the most important images to take. And you know, so we'll see lots of images of what the head of the valve looks like, which is important because the head of the valve gives you a kind of a temperature map of how the valve is operating. But I mean, the most important part about a valve is whether it's sealing correctly or not, and the sealing surfaces of the valve and what's called the face of the valve, and the mating surface of the seat insert are really important to image. And also valve stems and valve guides are very important to image, particularly in Lycomings where we have a lot of problems with sticking valves, and we want to see whether there's abnormal amounts of deposit buildup on valve stems, which might be a precursor to a valve sticking problem in the future. So, you know, images like this, which you can see are, you know, just glorious detail of exactly what the sealing surfaces look like. This is an exhaust valve that's fully open. Here's a picture of that same valve, but looking up into the opening where you can see the valve stem and the valve guide, and you can see the deposit formation on the valve stem. And here's an intake valve, and here's the stem of that intake valve. We very seldom get to see views like this because mechanics don't understand how important it is to be able to see this. For example, this intake valve, we want to see whether oil is getting into the intake port because of a sloppy fit between the valve and the guide. In this one, there is no evidence of oil, which is a good thing. But without an image like that, we don't get to see that. Now, you couldn't take images like this 5 years ago. We just didn't have the instruments to do it. But now we do, and they're cheap, and it's really important to be capturing this sort of stuff. So at any rate, it was clear that we had a pretty serious education problem, and we'd been talking about this internally for quite a while, and we decided to take the bull by the horns and do something about it. So I want to talk to you tonight about some of the things that we have done, and then briefly about some of the things that we're still working on in this area. But we really want to bring borescope inspections part of the mainstream of how maintenance of piston aircraft engines are done, because it's so very important. So at any rate, on the 1st of this year, January 1st, we officially launched what we call a Savvy Borescope Initiative. And just briefly, some things we did, and I'm going to go into more detail about all of these in a moment. But we published a standardized inspection protocol. What images we want taken from each cylinder in what particular sequence. We developed a 35-minute training video, which is up on YouTube, in which Dave Pasquale demonstrates exactly how to capture all of these images. We created a companion checklist for this protocol with both detailed verbal descriptions or detailed descriptions and also sample images, so that mechanics could see exactly what we're looking for and exactly how to position the scope to get those images, how to position the propeller and whether the valve should be open or closed and where the piston ought to be and all that stuff. And finally, an image repository with a user's guide, which we also put up on the internet for how to use it. And I'll talk a little bit more about the image repository in a minute. Which is, you know, what do you do with all these images once you capture them? So we spent, in addition to producing all of these written things in the video, we spent hundreds of man hours of software engineering time to extend Savvy's web-based platform, which already included, for example, all of our tools for analyzing engine monitor data and so on, to provide a platform for dealing with Borescope images, where you can upload images to the repository, organize them, archive them, analyze them, generate reports of them, and so on. So there was a lot of software involved, and all of this stuff got rolled out on the first year. And the image repository is a place where you can take all these images that you capture, upload them into the cloud, tag them so that each image is marked with what cylinder it came from, which view it is, and what inspection group it is. It's the 2024 annual inspection on November 2638 X-ray, and keep it archived so that you could compare these images with the images you take at the next inspection, and get some trend information. The repository includes a report generator that lets you print out really nice looking reports. They come out as PDF files, which you can print out and incorporate into maintenance records of the airplane. And I'll get into all of this in a little bit more detail. And in order to encourage the widest possible adoption of these standardized methods, the image protocol and the naming conventions and so on that I'm going to talk about, we decided to make this all available free to anybody that wants to use it, much in the way that we some years ago did with our engine monitor data repository, where we have about 6,000 paid clients at Savvy, but we've got 4,000 more people who open free accounts and use all of our software tools and stuff at no charge. And we decided to do the same thing with the Borescope Initiative. So all the stuff I'm talking about is available free to anybody who wants to use it. Any mechanic, any maintenance involved aircraft owner, all of this stuff is freely available. If you go to the SavvyAviation.com website and you click on resources, and then from the resources menu you click on other resources, you'll see a page that looks like this. In the upper left is a link that you can click on to open a free account. If you don't already have a free account on the Savvy Aviation platform, you can open a free account by clicking that link. And then over on the right side is a box that is specific to the Borescope Initiative that includes links to the training video, the 35-minute training video, to the illustrated checklist, and to the user guide for the Borescope image repository. So all of this stuff is available on the website, and available, again, all this stuff is free for anybody who wants to use it. So with that as overview, let me go into a little bit more detail about some of the things that I just introduced you to. And first of all, the inspection protocol. If your doctor sends you in to get an abdominal MRI or a CT scan of the lumbar spine or something, it doesn't matter what radiology tech does it, because they all follow a common protocol for doing the imaging, and so that the radiologist gets the same stuff regardless of which radiology tech was on duty running the machine. Well, we felt that we needed to do the same thing for cylinder borescope inspection. So we needed to have a standard protocol for what images to take in what sequence, and just like it would be if you were going to a medical imaging center, or even going to the dentist and having X-rays taken of your teeth. Those are always done using a standard imaging protocol. So at any rate, we turn to to Dave Pasquale, who's been a longtime member of the Savvy team, and Dave is a very experienced ANPIA who owns a shop in Pottstown, Pennsylvania. He's actually one of the 2 or 3 shops in the country that specializes on Blanca Super Vikings, but he's done a lot of pioneering work in various areas, including borescopy, and so we worked with Dave to develop this protocol, and the protocol involves capturing 11 specific views for each cylinder, and gives a specific order for capturing them. And the video illustrates the procedure for doing this. And here I know there's a lot of words on this slide, but these are the 11 views. So for each cylinder, we want these 11 views captured in this order. And just very quickly running down, and the first one is an image of the piston crown with the piston at bottom dead center. We want to get the entire piston crown in the image. So you hold the borescope up very close to the spark plug opening, and you run the piston all the way down the bottom dead center and capture an image of it. Then we take the valve images with the valves closed. Those are the ones that everybody always takes, the exhaust valve, the head of the valve with the valve closed, and the intake valve head with the valve closed. And it's important, again, to position the scope so that you get the entire valve in the image. We don't want like a third of the valve, which we get a lot of these close-ups where you don't get any context. So those are the first 3 images. Then we start taking a series of images with the valves open, and I showed you some good examples of those. But exhaust valve seat and face. The face of the valve is the sealing surface of the valve. The head of the valve is the part of the valve that you see when the valve's closed. So this is an image of the valve face and the valve seat. In other words, the sealing surfaces taken with the exhaust valve wide open. And then with the exhaust valve continue to be wide open, we work the scope up further into the opening, and we get an image of the valve stem and the valve guide. So that's 4 and 5. 6 and 7 are the same for the intake valve, with the intake valve wide open. First, the valve seat and the valve face, and second, the valve stem and the valve guide. And then the last 4 in the sequence are 4 images of the cylinder walls taken at the 12 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 6 o'clock, and 9 o'clock position. If there's corrosion in the cylinder, it's most likely going to start at the 12 o'clock position, because that's the part where it loses the oil film the earliest. If there's oil puddling, it's going to be down at the 6 o'clock position. If there's piston pin scuffing, or piston pin plug scuffing, I mean, it's going to be at the 3 or the 9 o'clock positions, because that's where the piston pin runs when the cylinder goes up and down. So we want 4 images of the cylinder walls taken at 12, 3, 6, and 9 o'clock. So those are the 11 images in the protocol, and that's the order in which we recommend that those images be taken. And that's the order in which you'll see Dave perform it if you watch the training video. Now, 11 views may seem like a lot. That's 66 images for a 6-cylinder engine, but we really feel that this is what's needed to cover all the bases and to see everything that it's important to see. And it turns out that with a little practice, you can take the 11 images in about 5 minutes. So if it's a 6-cylinder engine, you're talking about 30 minutes to get the 66 images. It doesn't take very long to do this. It takes a little bit of practice. The first time you you may have to think about it quite a bit, but very quickly it becomes automatic. And so taking 44 images or 66 images to do a complete borescope inspection of the cylinders on an engine is not excessively burdensome. Of course, these are this time assumes that the top cowling is already off and the top spark plugs are already out, which would both be the case when you're doing an annual inspection anyway. So it's not you're not doing anything additional there. You're just, my theory is any time a spark plug is out of a cylinder, it's sort of malpractice not to stick a borescope in the hole and look around. It's like if you pulled a cylinder off an engine, wouldn't you look and see what the cam looked like? Of course you would. And this is the same thing. So, at any rate, in order to keep these images well organized, if you're going to shoot 66 images of a 6-cylinder engine, you don't want to get them all mixed up. So we've come up with a recommended standardized file naming convention, a very simple one. I'll give you some examples. In order to ensure that when you wind up with 44 or 66 image files, you can figure out what you got. It's not necessary to use this naming convention. It's just something we recommend, and it's a convenience, but it's not mandatory. But our naming convention is very simple. The file names start out with a digit, which is what cylinder it is, and then 1 or 2 words describing what the view is. So a file called 5-piston.jpg is an image of the piston crown on cylinder number 5. 1-exhaust-head.jpg is a cylinder number 1 exhaust valve when it's closed, and so on. So they're very simple. And the last one is 4-wall-12, which is cylinder 4 cylinder wall at the 12 o'clock position. So it's not very hard to remember this naming convention, and it's pretty. And actually, our software, when it parses these file names, I'll talk about that in a second, uses some fuzzy logic. So even if you get the file name slightly screwed up, it'll usually be able to figure out what you meant. But basically, it's a cylinder number and then a word or 2 describing what the view is, and then of course the file type, which is usually JPG, but it can be PNG or some other image format as well. So anyway, after having devised this standard image protocol and file naming convention, we created a 35-minute training video starring Dave, and it's aimed primarily at A&Ps, but it's also of interest to maintenance valve aircraft owners who want to do their own imaging, and an increasing number of aircraft owners have decided to spring $250 or so and buy their own borescope, especially ones that that do their own oil changes and spark plug maintenance and so on. And in today's world of shops booked up a year in advance and a pretty acute mechanic shortage, more and more owners are sort of being forced into doing a lot of their own preventive maintenance, and so this is a good thing for owners to be able to do. But our primary audience for all of this was A&Ps, but it's certainly applicable to anybody who's interested in monitoring condition of their cylinders. So the video shows Dave, but Dave was going through one of his facial hair episodes when he did this video. You can see it's probably wintertime in Pottstown because he's got a heavy jacket on and he's got a beard, a goatee and a mustache. And then during the summer, I think the coat and the facial hair come off. But at any rate, this was Dave actually doing the borescope inspection of one cylinder during the video with his computer capturing the images. You can capture the images on a computer, on an iPad, pretty much anything you want. Occasionally I'll use an iPhone in a pinch as an imaging device. But he talks you through everything and shows how he positions the scope to get the right image and then shows example of the, brings up the full screen version of the image that he just took, and then goes on to the next one. So it's pretty interesting video. So he demonstrates each of these images in the 11 image protocol. And because mechanics always like to have written guidance, although I think the video is very instructive, and it's definitely worth the 35 minutes it takes to watch it, we also developed a companion checklist. It's 5 pages long, describes each of the images in detail, shows sample images, descriptions of how you get the images, and then on the final page of the 5-page checklist, it goes into the details of the file naming convention that I just talked to you about. So once you've got all these images, hopefully you've named the files something recognizable, although that's not a mandatory requirement. Then the question is, what do you do with the images? So we created this image repository, which is a software front end to a cloud storage thing. All of these things are actually kept on servers at Amazon Web Services. And it gives you the ability to upload all these images into the cloud, where they can be archived on a permanent basis. There's no limit on how much data you can upload or how long you can leave it there. It's just very much like our engine monitor data repository and we provide it all free to anybody who wants to use it. You'll need a free account so that the system knows who you are. But once you've opened a free account, you can upload Borescope images to your heart's content. You can also upload engine monitor data to your heart's content. It's all free. And basically, when you say you want to upload images, it brings up a screen that looks something like this. There's a box on the left-hand side of the screen that you can drag images into. If the images have recognizable file names that the software is able to parse, that they've followed the naming convention, or at least roughly followed the naming convention, then the system knows what those images are. It knows that they're, what cylinder it is and what view it is, and it'll automatically, what we call, tag the images by cylinder number and view. If you drag a file or an image file into that box that doesn't have a recognizable file name, then it just puts up some buttons, and you click a button for what cylinder it is, you click another button for what view it is, and then it tags the images. So it's a little quicker and easier if you've named the files according to the convention, but if you didn't, it's not a big deal. It just says, tell me what this is, and you click a cylinder number button, and you click a view button, and the image is automatically tagged. With just a couple of clicks. And all the images that you upload associated with a particular inspection is something we called an image set. And image sets are given a name. So a name of an image set might be November 2638 X-ray Annual 2024, or whatever you want. It's just a textual name, but it groups all of these images together under a single name, so that you can reference it and access it at a later time. And you can upload an unlimited number of image sets to the repository at no charge. There's actually an ulterior motive for us doing this, which I'll tell you about towards the end. So once you've uploaded all these images, the system has a report generator that allows you to print very nice looking reports of these images, all neatly labeled as to which one they are, and with commentary on it, where you can, either you or your mechanic, or in some cases a savvy person can look at these images and say, this one looks good, this one looks like maybe it's a burned valve, and And all of that information that you tag it with will come out when you generate the report. And the report comes out as a PDF file, which you can print out if you want to, and you can incorporate it into maintenance records. Here's kind of an example of one page of a report, so you can get a general idea what it looks like. These images were all marked satisfactory, but sometimes you won't mark them satisfactory. And you can mark them satisfactory and unsatisfactory, and you can click on various buttons saying various kinds of conditions that might be wrong, and you can also annotate them with free text if you want to. And if you're doing this with a free account, you or your mechanic can do the analysis and can annotate the images in this way. If you are a paid Savvy subscriber of Savvy Analysis or any of the higher tier plans like Savvy QA or Savvy MX, then there's an additional button that shows up on that screen that is marked Request Analysis. If you click that button, then the image set gets assigned to one of our analysts. They go over the images, they annotate them as to how, what they consider the various images show, and then they generate the report for you with their commentary. So you can either do it on a do-it-yourself basis, or if you're somebody who's on a paid Savvy plan, you can have Savvy staff do the analysis. And again, it's very parallel to how we handle engine monitor data, that we provide all the tools for analyzing it for free. If you want our staff to do the analysis, then you have to have a paid account. But if you want to do it yourself, it's all free. So all the tools that we use, we make available free to anybody that wants to use it. So we hope that doing it this way and making all these tools available free will help this initiative, the standard protocol and so on, gain wide industry acceptance by shops and mechanics and by maintenance involved owners to provide some sort of standardization in an area that there just hasn't been any. There's just been no guidance from manufacturers, been no training. It's just astonishing to me, more than 20 years after Continental started saying we want you to do borescope inspections, that nobody's ever written down how to do one, and that's what we tried to do. Because lack of standards and guidance and training has really hampered the use of the borescope to be the primary tool for assessing cylinder condition, which we felt strongly for a long time should be the primary tool, not the compression tester, but the borescope. It's just a much more discriminating and much more revealing tool than the compression tester is. And relying solely on compression testers and saying, if it's a weak compression, the cylinder has to come off, has been responsible for tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of cylinders being unnecessarily removed, which is not only expensive, but it also subjects people to risk that they shouldn't be subject to if it really wasn't necessary to pull the cylinder off. So our goal is to change that, and that's what this Borescope initiative was all about. But we're not done yet. That's kind of where we are right now. But I said we had an ulterior motive, and here's what it is. We want to build the largest collection of borescope images of cylinders ever assembled. And the reason we want to do that is so that we can start training machine learning neural networks in order to eventually be able to automate the process of analyzing borescope images. I've talked about in previous webinars the work that we're doing in engine monitor data analysis in this area. We're where we've already got a machine learning model that tries to predict the probability of exhaust valve failure. We're working on a project Gadfly that I've talked about. It's now in pretty advanced state of development, where we're analyzing engine monitor data, looking for all sorts of anomalous conditions that the aircraft owner ought to know about. And we want to do the same thing with Borescope images. We basically want to train machine learning, artificial intelligence to be able to look at images and flag the ones that look like they're problematic. You know, there's a lot of work been done. Doing this stuff on images is a little tricky, but a lot of work has been done in facial recognition and that sort of stuff. So we're starting with a pretty robust series of tools in the machine learning world. We already put together a model. This was just sort of a little play exercise to look at borescope images and try to determine what view it was, and what, you know, whether it was an exhaust valve or an intake valve, whether it was a piston crown, and so on. And with just a little work, we developed a machine learning model. It was about 85% accurate. It was like close to 100% accurate in some things, like it could always tell the difference between an exhaust valve and an intake valve. Where it struggled was areas where humans would struggle, like, you know, looking at a picture of a cylinder bore and determining whether it's a 12 o'clock shot or a 6 o'clock shot, and that's not easy even for humans to do. But at any rate, we did that just to sort of to get warmed up on this whole image processing, machine learning stuff. But our ultimate goal is to automate the process of analyzing borescope images using a machine learning model. And the key to that is to have, you know, a large body of data to train the neural network on, where somebody has looked at those images and tagged them as to what images they are, and then analyze them as to whether they're normal or abnormal, and if they're abnormal, what the abnormality seems to be. And once you do that, you can use that as training data and get a computer to do it automatically. So that's what we're working on. And hopefully, you know, this time next year, I'll be able to report on the progress that we've made. But pretty excited about just what we've developed so far, and we think it's a really important first step into bringing borescope evaluation of cylinders into the forefront in GA maintenance. So I'll keep you posted on how we're doing, but that's where we are right now. And Tim, that's all I have, but be happy to open it up for some Q&A.
All right, Mike, thanks much. Very interesting. Thank you and your staff for putting this together. And boy, we had a good crowd on tonight, so I think the word will travel about it. First, Michael was wondering, this is moving towards on-condition maintenance, it seems. Is there enough instrumentation to get there?
Moving toward on-condition maintenance. So we've been preaching on-condition maintenance since the beginning of time. I mean, my first book, Manifesto, which came out in 2014, was all about why we should be doing maintenance strictly on condition. But you know, the manufacturers always publish all of these timetables that they want you to do stuff on, and you know, our position has always been to reject most of those timetables. There are a few that are worth paying attention to, but we don't believe in doing maintenance on a timetable. We believe in doing it on condition. The whole notion of reliability-centered maintenance is all built around doing things on condition as opposed to on some arbitrary schedule. And part of the problem is that the schedules that the manufacturers put together for maintenance are of necessity one size fits all schedules, and because they have to work for everybody, they're always calibrated to the worst case airplane. I was talking to a guy today during the summit at Shell, who was a very high-ranking person in the maintenance side of Cirrus aircraft. And I've had similar talks with people at Cessna and so on, and they freely admit that their maintenance schedules have to be hyper conservative because they have to work for the worst case airplane. Most of us don't fly the worst case airplane, so following the manufacturer's schedules usually means doing a lot more maintenance than our airplane really needs. And that's why we think it's not a great idea to do that. We think maintenance should be done on condition to the greatest extent possible. And that's a lesson the airlines learned back in the late 60s. And I don't know why it's taking so long for this concept to get into the GA maintenance culture. It's just that maintenance people are very risk averse, and they don't like to change stuff, and the manufacturers, a lot of their guidance is very, very old and hasn't been updated for a long time and doesn't reflect modern maintenance philosophy. If the airplane is a Gulfstream, then it probably does, but if it's a Bonanza, it probably doesn't. So we believe very strongly in on-condition maintenance. The only exception to that are things where there's not a good way to determine condition. We believe in that we really need to open magnetos up every 500 hours, because without opening the mag up, there's no way of determining what its condition is, and mag failure is not acceptable. And there are a lot of very breakable parts inside a mag, a lot of things made of plastic and so on that tend to break. And there's, we can't stick a borescope inside a mag and look around. We can't check the magneto's oil filter for metal because there is no oil filter in a magneto. There really isn't any way of determining the condition of a magneto without tearing it apart. So we have to do that on a timetable. But 95% of the components on our aircraft are relatively easy to determine condition through inspection. And so we believe the energy should go into determining condition, not blindly doing preventive maintenance on a fixed timetable. And I think that's been what we've been preaching for years and years now.
Our most common question, many people have asked, but what borescope do you recommend, and do you make them available? Do you sell them through your company, or where would you get them?
We don't. We don't sell any borescopes. The borescope that Dave used in his in the training video, and the borescope that a lot of us use ourselves, and that I use on my own airplane, is it's a scope called a Vividia VA400, and it has gone through a bunch of upgrades. It's now up to version 5, and so if you want to get a Vividia VA400, I suggest that you buy it directly from the manufacturer, who's a company called Oasis Scientific, because that's the only way you're going to be guaranteed you're going to get the very latest version of the scope. If you order it off of Amazon, we've had a couple people order them off of Amazon and then had to return them because they turned out to be a generation or two old. And Vividia has been upgrading this thing like crazy. In fact, I just got a brand new one called a VA400i, which is the I stands for iPhone, and it's a one that's optimized for use with Apple devices as a display. But there are, and I think the list price for that scope now is $299.95, and I think somebody told me that they went to order it from Oasis Scientific, and they had some sale where it was, I don't know, $230 or something like that. So, which is a great deal. And you can probably get really good deals on it at AirVenture as well. This is not the only decent scope. That there are now quite a few to choose from in this price range. It's under $300 price range. It's very important that the scope have an articulating tip, so that's one of the innovations that we didn't used to have. It used to be that borescopes had a fixed viewing angle. It was either a 90-degree viewing angle scope or a 0-degree viewing angle scope. One of the things that gives us the ability to get all these wonderful images is that the new borescopes have articulating tips where you can bend the tip to either be looking straight out the shaft or 180 degrees back at where you stuck it into the hole, or any angle in between. And that's a very important feature. The other thing is a lot of the scopes are flexible scopes. Flexible scopes are great for lots of applications, but we find that for cylinder imaging, a rigid scope is easier to manipulate. The flexible ones are just too hard to get into position. And then there are sort of compromises. There are ones that are called semi-rigid, which they're flexible, but they take some force to flex them. And so I would definitely recommend getting either a rigid or a semi-rigid scope, not a flexible one. And definitely recommend getting one that has a fully articulating tip and a high definition camera, a full HD resolution camera. And again, you probably noticed from a couple of the images I put up how much better resolution the images that we're getting from these new scopes is than what we used to see, because it wasn't very long ago that these scopes had, like, 640 by 480 resolution, and now they're 4 times that resolution. It's just amazing how what beautiful images that they produce. So I think those are the key things that we're looking at, but in particular the scope that that Dave uses in the video, and the scope that I use in my own hangar is the Vividia VA400.
Unfortunately, it's not like buying a good quality torque wrench that'll last you 15, 20 years, huh? With the quality, Dennis says that he purchased Vividia VA400 in 2019, and images just aren't that sharp as he sees now with the new scope.
Yeah, I remember it wasn't too many years ago that the scopes of choice were Snap-on BK somethings, and now those things are they're so primitive that they're almost considered unusable. The technology of these scopes has progressed so rapidly, and the price has come down so sharply. I'm not sure that they will continue to develop at the same pace, but they're just so much better than they were, and so much less expensive than they were.
Mm-hmm. Barry says, what camera software options are available, and what do you recommend? What are the pros and cons of image naming and file organization between software options?
That's a really good question, because that's one of the biggest complaints that we get is that the imaging software has not kept up with the scopes. The imaging software is still kind of clunky. The video offers a recommended app Some people like it, some people hate it. When you plug these scopes in, the scopes are either USB scopes that'll plug into a USB port on a computer or on an Android pad or something, or they're wireless, where they'll connect to your device via Bluetooth or Wi-Fi. But when they connect to whatever imaging device you're imaging on, they basically just look like a camera. So pretty much any software that's capable of taking pictures from a camera can work with the Borescope, and so you have quite a bit of choice as to what imaging app that you want to use to capture the images. It's been suggested to me that it would really be nice to have an app that was specially designed for this process and had the 11 image protocol built into the software and named things automatically if you shot the images in the right sequence. And I agree. I'm not sure whether we're prepared to take that on. Developing apps for end users is not something that Savvy has ever done in the past, but if somebody was interested in doing that, we would certainly be interested in talking to them about it. Because I do think that the software used to capture these images right now on various devices is something of a weak link in the chain, and we could do better.
Mm-hmm. Michael says, my mechanic is a great old-time mechanic that I literally trust my life. He has never mentioned using a borescope or doing an inspection with it. How do you recommend I broach the topic of doing a borescope inspection with him? I fly a Cessna 182.
I have two alternative recommendations. Recommendation one is see if you can talk him into spending 35 minutes of his life watching Dave's video. I think Dave is also a pretty gray beard mechanic who will probably relate to your guy will probably relate to, and since Dave seems to know what he's talking about, it might convince your mechanic. The other alternative option, because not all mechanics are convincible, is to start taking your own borescope images. And to be honest with you, we frequently get better images from owners than we do from mechanics, because the owners seem to understand a little bit more about what we're actually looking for when we take these images, because they've read more stuff and they've attended more webinars and stuff like that. But mechanics, and I guess I'm allowed to say stuff like this because I'm a mechanic myself, but aircraft mechanics seem to be they don't like change very much, and it takes a lot of effort to get mechanics to try new things. And like I said, they don't teach this stuff in A&P school. The manufacturers don't put them in the manuals. It's we're fighting something of an uphill fight because the industry has not been doing this, and we have to be very, very patient to try to get mechanics to adopt this. Young mechanics tend to be much more interested in this. They kind of love technology, love computers and stuff. And it's the old super experienced mechanics that you have the hardest time trying to convince that this is a good idea.
For $300, maybe give your mechanic a Christmas or birthday present, buy him one. And
well, but giving him the borescope doesn't guarantee that he's going to use it.
You got that right. So a couple of people are wondering, how did they find Dave? And is it Pasquale's video you're talking about, the training video? How do they find that?
Oh, just go to the savvyaviation.com website, and in the top menu bar, go to resources, and then from the drop-down menu, go to other resources, and there's a whole section on the Borescope Initiative with links to the video, the checklist, the image repository, user's guide, and also a link to opening a free account if you don't already have a free account.
And John wonders, does the training video help us identify cylinder problems?
No, the training video was really focused on how to capture the images. You know, we probably should consider doing another video talking about interpretation of those images, but you know, 35-minute video is pretty close to a little over the max length that people are willing to sit still and watch a YouTube video. So we didn't want to go any further than that. So really the focus on of that particular video is how to capture the images, not how to analyze them.
Michael wonders, are there any applications you've used borescoping for besides engines, such as hard to reach airframe locations?
Oh yeah. I've got an upcoming video talking about, it's a video that, I mean a webinar that's titled A Tale of Two Pre-Buys, where I talk about pre-buy examinanations. And we've got a mechanic that we use for pre-buys. He's not a savvy staff person. He's somebody that we frequently will engage to do pre-buys for our clients, who borescopes literally everything you can possibly borescope. And when he does a pre-buy examination, he fills a huge Dropbox folder full of borescope images of, you know, of control cable pulleys rubbing, of just, you know, corrosion that he found somewhere deep in the bowels of something. But he sticks the borescope any place you can possibly stick a borescope. Some engines, by the way, you can borescope cam and lifters pretty well. Some you can't. For example, the Lycoming 6-cylinder engines, you can put a borescope down through the oil filler port and see several cam lobes and several lifters that way, and get very nice pictures of them. 4-cylinder Lycomings, you can't. There's no good way to get to image those. Some Continental engines, what were called the Sandcast series of Continental engines that have a oil cooler in the front, those also you can borescope the camshaft through the oil filler, although it's a little harder because the cam is down below the crankshaft on those engines. But by positioning the crank throw so it's out of the way, you can get a borescope down there. On the other hand, the Continental Permold series engines, which are the ones with the alternator in the front and the oil cooler in the back, those, there's not a real easy way to borescope the cam. So it really depends from one series of engines to another whether you can get good borescope images of the inside the crankcase. But yeah, there are lots of places on airframes and stuff where the borescopes can come in very handy. And in inspecting airframe things, frequently a flexible scope works better than a rigid scope. The rigid scope's what we recommend for cylinder work. But I have one of each in my toolbox: a flexible scope and a rigid scope. I use the rigid scope for cylinders. Now I'll use the flexible scope for other things.
Barry says, as an orthopedic surgeon, I've been doing 2-port surgery for 40+ years, 1 port for the scope and the other port for the operative tool. Can you do something similar to fix cylinders, i.e. grinding off deposits, rust, lab valves?
Apparently you were not at my webinar last month, the War on Jugs one, when we talked about how we do lapping of valves. And we do exactly that. we actually have two holes in the cylinder, an upper spark plug hole and a lower spark plug hole, so we don't have to use scalpels and we don't have to stick troc cars in. The manufacturer conveniently already put those holes in there for us. And you know, when I lap a valve in place without dropping the exhaust or anything like that, I have a borescope looking through the top spark plug hole, and I have a swab with lapping compound inserted through the bottom hole, and manage to get the lapping compound into the right place, watching what I'm doing on the scope. And the first time you do it, you always turn things the wrong direction until you get oriented. but yeah, but that's exactly what we do. Working through the two openings, one for the scope and one for the tool that we're trying to do the surgery with.
Glenn wonders, how can I find out if my maintenance shop is using savvy Borescope software?
Oh, well, there is no such thing as savvy Borescope software. You probably meant the repository. And it's very unlikely that they are, because it's quite new. You should probably introduce them to it, but we're just trying to get the word out to as many shops and mechanics as we can about our recommended imaging protocol, the training video, the checklist, and the image repository, because we think they're extremely valuable tools, and we provide all of them at no cost. And we're trying to set a standard where there has never been a standard, and we're trying to provide some guidance where there just hasn't been any guidance.
Roy wonders, is this information in that repository only available to the account owner or the aircraft owner?
Good.
Or does anybody have access to it?
Well, certainly it is definitely not the case that anybody has access to it. However, because it is not uncommon for owners, for example, to take borescope images, put them in the repository, and then want their mechanics to take a look at them without having to give the mechanic their user ID and password. We do have the provision that the owner can open a free account, the mechanic can open a free account, and then the owner can specifically authorize that the mechanic's account can access his images. And that's a capability that we included in the software. It actually wasn't there on the 1st of January, but it is there now. So you can share the data with your mechanic, but nobody can look at it unless you explicitly give them authorization to look at it. And the same is also true of engine monitor data, same thing.
Phil wonders, why would you advocate replacing compression testing with borescope inspection? Why or why not?
Well, you know, it's funny. This harks me back to a conversation that I had some years back with one of the very top guys at Continental Motors, who subsequently moved on. And you know, and he basically said, if Continental could do away with the compression test, they would, but we can't do away with the compression test because it's written into the regulations, and I kind of went into that in my webinar last month, the war on jugs, which you can review the video if you want to. But the requirement for doing compression test, it was written into the FARs years and years ago, and it's not likely to come out. So we basically have to do compression tests, and I'm not saying it's a bad thing to do compression tests. I mean, all data is good. The more data we have, the better. what's bad is having sole reliance on compression as the be all and end all of assessing cylinder condition. And the worst is having a rule like what the FAA promulgated in AC 4313, which really doesn't apply to most engines anymore because the manufacturers have superseded it. That says, if the compression is less than 60/80, the cylinder has to come off. That's crazy guidance. Because first of all, having low compression doesn't necessarily mean the cylinder is sick. And second of all, if it is sick, it doesn't necessarily mean it's sick enough that it has to come off. Frequently, it's a problem that can be fixed without pulling the cylinder off. So what's bad is doing compression tests and nothing further. The compression test provides some good supporting information, but the Borescope tells you much more about the cylinder than the compression test possibly can. The compression test was a test that was developed back before we had the ability to look inside cylinders and get these stunning images of anything we want to look at. It's a very indirect means of trying to assess cylinder condition, and it's not very accurate. It's not very reproducible, and there's a lot not to like about it. But we don't have the option of not doing it. The FAA in its infinite wisdom wrote it into the regs and isn't about to take it out. So it's something we have to do. But we certainly shouldn't be relying solely on compression to make expensive decisions on things that are, fairly risky to do.
Scott says, our mechanic said if the compression test is good, why bother with the Borescope? The engine was recently overhauled. Any comments?
Well, and there's ton of mechanics that believe that. And by the way, that's not, for example, what Continental says. Continental doesn't say only do a Borescope inspection if the compression is weak. Continental says you have to do a Borescope inspection anytime you do a compression test. Even if all the compressions are 78/80, they want you to do a Borescope inspection. And, the reason is that, just because the compression is good doesn't mean the cylinder is healthy. And just because the compression is bad doesn't mean the cylinder is sick. It's just not a good enough test to rely on. And like I said, my personal feeling is anytime there's a hole in a cylinder, it's crazy not to look inside. I mean, anytime you pull a spark plug out, you ought to stick a Borescope in the hole. It just doesn't make sense not to. It doesn't take but a couple minutes.
Lester says, are you going to have a webinar that actually discusses Borescope results? For example, the database showing acceptable, questionable, and unserviceable pictures of components, valves, guides, etc.
Yeah, I've done some in the past, like the webinar that was titled Borescope Ascendancy. I had a lot of examples of Borescope pictures of healthy things and sick things. And once we start getting a significant number of images in the repository, and we already have probably 10,000 Borescope images in the repository since the first of the year. And I have some, really good examples. I'll probably do another webinar because I'll have, really better images and better annotation of those images than I've had in the past. I think that would definitely be worth doing another webinar on. And I would like to, give some examples and talk about how we go about looking at these images and what we can tell from looking at them, what the progression of valve burning is and how far it can go before it's gotten to the point where there's no choice but to pull a cylinder, what piston pin scuffing looks like, how you can tell if the we see a lot of problems for example, with freshly overhauled engines or brand new cylinders that just got put on an engine, where something wasn't right, where the ring gaps weren't set up correctly, and you know, these are not only age-related problems. We see a lot of infant mortality problems too. And I'd love to put together, you know, a bunch of examples of some of that stuff so you can see what it looks like. And I will definitely do that in an upcoming webinar. It'll probably be several months in the future before I can do that. But yeah, that's something I would like to do very much.
Greg was wondering, does this apply equally to Rotax engines as it does to Lycoming and Continental?
Well, I think it does, but I have to be honest with you that we don't we've not looked at a lot of Rotax Borescope images, and one of the guys that was here with me today at the Shell summit was one of the all-time Rotax gurus in the universe, Phil Lockwood, who runs Lockwood Aviation Companies in Sebring, Florida, who's probably the dominant Rotax overhaul shop in the country and big parts distributor for Rotax and so on. And this is something I'd love to chat with Phil about, because he knows those engines better than just about anybody.
Mm-hmm. Philip asks, can you upload a partial set of images? I have images from previous years, but that was before the protocols, so I don't have the entire set of 11 images.
You can, and we're often asked to look at partial image sets, and you know, obviously we'd rather see the full boat, but we'll look at, you know, we look at what we have and try to give impressions. But you know, like I said, it's when I think about the images that we've been receiving from A&Ps over the years, you know, some of them are okay, but a lot of them aren't okay. We very seldom see images taken with the valves open. Very important. We very frequently get images that were taken too close up, so that only a piece of the valve or a piece of the piston crown is imaged rather than the whole thing, making it very difficult. I mean, for example, when we're looking at the head of a valve, that is what the valve looks like when it's closed, what we're looking for is symmetry or asymmetry of the heat signatures. Well, the only way you can tell whether it's symmetrical or not is be able to see the whole thing. If somebody's showing you you know, what a third of a valve looks like, you can't really tell whether it's symmetrical or not. So you know, it's very important when you're shooting these images, to whatever it is you're taking a picture of, to try to get the whole thing in the shot, not just a piece of it. And somehow there's this misimpression that, you know, the close-ups give you more detail and stuff, but it's really not what we need when we're trying to analyze these things. We need, you know, an image of the full piston crown, an image of the full exhaust valve and the full intake valve, not little pieces of them. And doing that requires, you know, putting the scope in the right position, and in the case of the valves, making sure the piston's down near bottom dead center, so you can get the camera far enough from the valve to get the whole thing in, and so on.
Joseph wonders, on the naming of the folder, can you include the tach time, and do you think it would be beneficial?
Yeah, you can put anything you want in terms of the image set name. That's just free text, and you can put anything you want in there that you'd find useful.
And Larry wonders, should I take a set and upload of my new engine before the first run?
Before the first run?
Yeah, brand new engine before he runs it.
Well, you know, I'm not going to say no, you shouldn't do it, but there's probably not a lot you can tell by looking inside an engine that hasn't been run, because there aren't any signatures on anything. There's, you know, there's not going to be scratches. There's not going to be vertical scoring. There's not going to be any heat signature on the valves. There's just going to be shiny metal because the engine hadn't been run. So you're probably not going to be able to tell a lot from a brand new engine. You probably tell a whole lot more if you image an engine that had 50 hours on it.
All right, Mike. Well, thank you so much. Looks like we got to the end here of our allotted time. So let's wrap it up, please. We had a great turnout tonight. It was over 1,500 people.
Oh my.
And just a ton of great questions. Sorry we couldn't get to everyone's question. Take a moment, Mike, and share your closing thoughts.
Okay, well, I don't have a lot, just the usual stuff. If you'd like to be on my our email list. I'm sorry, it's getting late here. I'm on Central Time. I'm not usually on this same time zone. The easiest way to do that, if you're in North America, is to just pick up a smartphone and text the word SAVVY, SAVVY, to 33777, and it'll ask you for your email address, first name and last name. It'll put you on our mailing list. If you're not in North America, then probably go to the website and click on the link up at the top of the page to add yourself to the mailing list. Oh, we're getting really close to finishing the audiobook version of Airplane Ownership Volume 2. We've got about 3/4 of the chapters recorded now, and so it should be finished pretty soon now. Be excited about that. The first 3 books are all available in audiobook form, and the 4th one we're in the process of finishing off. The books are all available at the EAA Bookstore, Aircraft Spruce, on Amazon, and the audiobook versions are available on Audible. And we're doing our Ask the A&P podcast twice a month now, and Tim, this is hot off the press, but the last couple of years we did a live version of the podcast at AirVenture, which was a little terrifying for us the first time we did it, because normally when we do the podcast, we get to see the questions a day in advance, so we have a chance to think about the answers a little bit. But of course, at AirVenture, we're on the spot. We're sitting there on a stage in front of a lot of people. So these things were so popular that this year we're actually doing 2 live podcast sessions at AirVenture, one on Tuesday and one on Saturday. And the last 2 years they've been standing room only. So we'd love to see as many people as possible to bring their thorniest and most embarrassing questions to the podcast recording session at AirVenture. I guess AirVenture is still a couple months off, but I'm getting all spooled up for it already. It's just I considered this flight out to Houston in my 310 just sort of a shakeout cruise in preparation to flying to Oshkosh. So.
We're getting close, Mike. We're getting close.
Yeah,
yep,
absolutely.
It's getting close. Yeah, well, I'm glad to.
And finally, the next 3 webinars, and normally my webinars are the first Wednesday of each month, but unfortunately in July, the first Wednesday, I am going to be on an airliner returning home from London, and I won't be able to do it. So we've rescheduled the July one to Tuesday, July 9th. So the June webinar talks about minimally invasive maintenance. The July webinar, which was going to be on a Tuesday, is the one that I referred to briefly. It's called A Tale of Two Pre-Buys. We do lots and lots of pre-buys at Savvy, and we've seen we've seen pretty much everything that can go wrong with pre-buys. And so I'm going to compare two actual pre-buys, one that went horribly wrong and one that went very, very well, and just try to derive some lessons learned about how to do pre-buys from those two examples. And then finally, August, after I get back from AirVenture and recover, the webinar is called Unaffordable, Unavailable, talking about some of the difficulties we're having in getting repair parts nowadays for airplanes, and what kind of strategies we have to use to counteract that. And that's about all I have.
Well, thank you, Mike.
Tomorrow
Great.
morning, I'm jumping in the 310 and heading back to California.
Well, safe flight for you. Hope you have tailwinds and good
No,
blue skies.
I had tailwinds coming out, so I'm guaranteed to have headwinds going back.
You're heading west, yeah. Okay.
But I'm a patient man. It'll take whatever it takes.
Yeah, well, you got a twin engine one too that you can, yeah.
It's all about the journey, not the destination, right?
Hey, right on. Well, thank you so much, Mike. This is really just amazing stuff here. Thank you so much for what you and Savvy and your entire team are doing here, making this initiative available to anyone for free, and the repository of all these images, and eventually getting AI to help, evaluate. This is just amazing, remarkable stuff. And thank you so much for putting the effort into it.
I'm just the cheerleader. We have an incredible team of people who are doing all the work, and Dave gets a lot of credit, I think, for inspiring a lot of this stuff. Our software engineers have just done a bang up job on the image repository stuff. So a lot of people involved in this.
It just feels like this is going to have an impact in the future in a positive way. So
I hope so. If we can just get some of these graveyard mechanics to die off.
Yeah, well, I got friends who, die and swear by their flip phones. They just can't figure out these smartphone things. It's like, yeah, I love my flip phone.
And they're A&Ps, right?
All right. Well, thank you so much, Mike. Great presentation. And to everybody who tuned in, thank you so much for joining us, everyone. Have a wonderful evening.
Good evening from Houston, Texas.